We're live, Antonia. How are you?
Good, Beth. How are you?
I'm so happy that you're here on Women Investor Wednesdays.
So am I. This is I love it that you have this space, and I'm extremely excited to be a part of it.
So before we get started, I always like to just do a real quick intro of why I'm doing this, because this is a mission, and with your help and all of the ladies' help that come on this platform and share their stories, I'm trying to get women to consider investing in commercial real estate, because I found out in 2019 that of all of the investors in commercial real estate, only 3% were women. And of that 3%, half of the 3% were inherited or spouses signing on their husband's guarantees, which means I and you are part of 1.5%. And I just find that to be outrageously awful. And I said, how can I help change that? And so I started interviewing friends here in South Florida and really around the country, just women. Do you invest? Yes. Where would you invest in real estate? No. Where do you invest? The stock market. Okay. Well, but you rep Starbucks and you find a site for Starbucks. You don't invest in that deal? No. And so I go, well, why don't you invest? And so at first people said, well, I don't have $1 million. So I debunked that. Like, you don't need $1 million to get started, right? And well, it's risky and it's scary. And I like, well, and you can lose money. I go, well, all of that's true for the stock market too. And the majority of the women I spoke to were in commercial real estate in some position or job. So it's like legal insider trading. So finally, it got down to, they said, which makes a lot of sense, I don't know any other women doing it. Aha, this is a problem I can solve. So we had during COVID, we had a virtual summit where we had 8 women like you, who I interviewed, tell their stories about how they invested in commercial real estate. It went over super well. We had 100 women attend. And since then, we've had 3 other events live. In March, it'll be our 5th annual, where I interview women and get their stories out so that the women in the audience, we're up to about 225 now, they can't say anymore they don't know any other women doing it. And then I took it last year. I said, if I'm only ever going to have 200 or 225 women at this event, how do I get the rest of the millions of women to learn about how other women are investing? And that's why I came up with Women Investor Wednesdays. So thank you for being here. And let's jump in and share a little bit of your story. We're going to talk about deals and we're going to talk about the exciting thing you're working on now, but just give everyone a background of who you are and how you got started in investing.
Yeah, so I actually started out in architecture. I'm a registered architect. I went to school for it, practiced architecture in New York for a little bit, and then eventually I went to work in commercial real estate as a project manager. So I kind of made that jump, and I worked for a couple of really large developers, one in New York and one national. With the national one, we ended up doing a lot of reposition or rehab work really across the country in hotel projects. So I got to build a team. We got to work on some really big things. And one of the projects that I did, which was really not one of the national projects, but it was in New York, it was the repositioning of the TWA flight center into the lobby of the TWA hotel. So we were basically on the execution side, really making these projects happen. And then COVID hit, and a lot of hospitality got hit pretty hard. And it was also time for me to open up my own shop. So I started doing similar thing where I managed projects for other people across the country in the multifamily and hospitality space. And we did all kinds of stuff. We've done ground up, we've done rehabs, we've done ground up hospitality. We've also done some insurance claim work that's been really complex. So understanding, the institutional level reporting. So we've done a lot of that. And I have a background in urban design. I went to school for it. A lot of the projects that I did in New York had obviously a major urban component. So we've also done some resort communities and master plan communities around specific programmatic things like entertainment, or we're working right now. So I still have a development management company, and that's still, we have a great pipeline, great clients that we're doing projects for. One of them is a surf park. So it's this entire urban development around a 5-acre wave pool. So that's super exciting. Fun. Yeah, that's really great. And so that's kind of how we got the start. And we've been doing this for other people and for investors. And, I've had a lot of people say, well, why aren't you doing this for yourself? Why aren't you raising money? And because you're doing the hard part, you're doing the execution, you're dealing with the jurisdictions, you're hiring teams, you're doing all the really hard stuff that people don't know how to do, to the point where they're hiring you to do it. So why aren't you doing this? So I've been hearing this for a while. And earlier this year, I got together with someone who came from the finance world, also with very impressive institutional experience, but on the money side. And we paired up earlier in 2024. We met at the end of 2023, and we got together. We came up with a thesis. We've started studying the market. We've done a lot of work in understanding and looking at New York, which is where a lot of my network is. And we started a development company. So that's what we've been working on. And right now we're raising money in 2 different ways. We have a closed-end fund, and then we also raise deal by deal for really JVs and co-GP opportunities on the deal level, and then for smaller check sizes at the fund level. So that is, and we were just chatting about how the timing is pretty great, because we're going to be going very live and very public about the fund next week. So that's how I got into it.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So with your partner, with the company that you have now, will you only be doing ground up developments?
So the answer, it's nuanced. The answer is no. Most of it will be ground up. The other thing that we are looking at, which is where a lot of my development experience comes from, is going to be in repositioning assets, especially in New York. So our development company is mostly focused in Manhattan. The fund is very specific for condo projects in Manhattan, south of 59th Street, mostly on the west side. So we have a very tight buy box. We're between 40,000 and 120,000 square feet. So that's very generally the kinds of projects we're looking at. We might go a little bit over 120,000, but for the most part, that's kind of what we're sticking to. And anything below 40,000, we just don't get the economy of scale and don't really have a good way to make it work. But within that, we are also seeing some of repositioning projects, so office to residential conversions. But the bar is set really high for those. So, in about 14 months that we've been looking at projects, I'd say we've only really liked 2 that we've pursued seriously. So, and one of those we're pursuing right now. And it's a component of it.
So in 14 months, how many projects have you looked at to only like 2?
To only like 2 in the repositioning aspect. We've looked at a lot more that we've liked for ground up. So I would say we've looked at probably 50 or 60 different deals, out of which we've only created memos and pursued and put in front of investors about a handful. And of that handful, only 2 of them, one was straight up a conversion and massive repositioning. Actually, we were going to do all kinds of crazy things to that building. And then the one we're looking at now, there's a lot, and then there's a building nearby that they're owned by the same entity. So that's going to be the deal. So that's what we're looking at right now.
Very exciting. Do you have the lot in the building under contract yet?
We don't. We actually, what we got was a heads up that it will be for sale, which is a big deal in that it's given us a little bit of time to get our ducks in a row and speak with investors. The entity that is going to put this up for sale is an entity that once they have a mandate to sell, they will sell. There's no going back. It's a large, entity. It's a nonprofit. So it's not, it's not some guy who's going to change his mind. So, and then they have to run like an actual bid process. It's also part of their mandate. So we'll be part of that bid, but getting that heads up and having, a few months to work it before anyone knows that it's for sale is some advantage. So
And this will
that's
be
where
your
we are.
first deal with the new company.
That's right. Yeah, that will be our first our first one. And we're also, the other thing too is I spend some time in the Mountain West, so we are every now and then people will approach me more for the development management aspect, and we're now in a position where if we like a deal enough, we could also be investors in it, and we are set up that way. So that's also something that if it comes our way in the Mountain West, we're also very comfortable here. But most of our work is really targeted, and the fund is targeted for New York.
And in the Mountain West projects, you all would go in as LPs?
No, we would be the GP.
Okay.
Yeah, the big thing about what we do is we have a really great team that executes. Where it's a lot of our work and a lot of our funds come from the fact that we've been executing for other people for a long time now. So that kind of, us being an LP would kind of defeat the purpose of our involvement, in the sense that a lot of our value comes from the work that we do.
Well, wait till you get to be a little older. So I started as an LP, then I did the GP thing, and I still am a GP in 4 projects, but now I'm really loving the LP part again, where I'm not doing all of the work.
No, I hear you. Yeah.
I tell Natasha and Shiloh and all of our friends that I love giving a check and getting checks.
Yeah, and also too, what I love that you're doing is you're investing in these women. So it's not just, you're not just putting this out there as, oh, these are great stories, but it's like you believe in this truly. And it's some really high quality investments. And so I love that. And I love that as a potential future to say, hey, if we do well, and hopefully we do, and we make money for our investors, for me, like, investing in other women and investing in young people who are starting out is going to be something that I'm probably going to want to do as well.
And that I didn't really expect that to come from the summit, but that has come out of the summit. 2 things.
Yeah.
One, I've met women that I now invest with that I didn't know. Shiloh, I didn't know, and I'm her partner in her latest Oakland deal.
Love it.
And and the women are meeting women in the room, and they're investing with each other, which is, again, maybe if I would have sat down and thought about it, I was just thinking, let's get everyone in a room, and I just want to inspire them and share other people's journeys and stories along with my own.
Yeah.
I should have thought that, and we'll all invest together, but I just wasn't thinking that far out.
I mean, I think that's just in a way, it's sort of a proof that the idea is a good one, because you're putting together groups of people who have a lot in common, regardless of whether we're women or not. And so we're going to be looking at good deals. We're going to be looking to steward our money, or our investors' money, and we're going to be looking to do it in a thoughtful way. And if we're surrounded by a group of people who are putting together these great investments, it's great that it's happening.
Absolutely. Now, did you LP before with other groups that you were working with and helping on being on the execution team? Did you have an opportunity to do that or no?
No. So the majority of our time in the execution side, and part of the reason I don't love to invest in projects where we're the development manager, is because you begin to have a sort of blurring of who's who on the project. And so in those instances, if something does come across my desk and someone says, hey, look, there's an opportunity to invest in this, we'd love for you to be the GP, we would want that to be clear from the get-go. I wouldn't want it to be like, oh, can you manage this project for us? And by the way, can you invest in it? I think that I like to have it be very, very clear what our role is, because it's just better. I think it just makes a better project.
Was it hard? Is it hard for you to consider thinking that for all of these years you've been on the execution team? And so, like, for me, when I was an LP for 7 years, and then or not some, I don't know, 92 to 2004. So 12 years. I did 7 projects. Then I left that company, went out on my own and said, I'm going to GP. And it was not as easy as it looked.
Yeah.
Like, are you seeing like what challenges or obstacles or things that you didn't expect to happen are happening where you're like, oh, this is interesting?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question, because in the execution, we're so used to having very specific milestones and deadlines, and you're moving, you're constantly making phone calls, you're showing up on site, you're getting on a plane, you're doing all these things. There's a lot of team, there's a lot of, it's just go, go, go. Whereas when you're actually raising money and setting up funds, for us, we spent a good amount of time with counsel. Like, I wanted to understand the securities laws behind it. I wanted to understand, because that's the way that I got really good at the execution. The way that I built my team is we've sat on every side of the table. Like, we all have general contracting experience. We all have, architecture, structure, consulting experience. We all have development experience. So we work for developers. So we've sat on every side and we know how long things take. We know the technical aspects. I wanted to have the same proficiency when it came to understanding the laws that we needed to follow in order to comply with the SEC requirements and blue sky laws and all the stuff that we needed to do. I wanted to understand the market so that when we were putting something in front of an investor, we were not totally crazy and totally out of market. So we spent quite a bit of time doing that. And it ended up, there's a lot of like, hurry up and wait. There's a lot of like waiting and sort of like thinking that, because I had been doing this for over 10 years now, where you have this level of proficiency where you just know what's going to be the next step. It was sort of that novice moment where you're now in this environment that thankfully, we're surrounded by an incredible team of people. We have really good counsel. We have great advisors. My partner has managed a lot of money. So he has a very specific way of looking at investments that I think has been incredibly comforting for me when we're looking at a pro forma and I'm like, well, like how, let's look at these construction numbers and whatever. And then he's looking at the overall picture. So having that, it's been a lot slower in that sense, but not in a bad way. I think it's just, we've taken our time. We've been really thoughtful. I didn't expect it to be as thoughtful as it's, as technical as it has been. And in a way that's also been really great. Like, we've learned a ton, and we've picked up really great team members on the way, because whenever we ran into something that we were like, well, I don't know how to do this, or who would know about this, I knew who to call at least. So right. It was kind of realizing that I had a better network than I thought I did. I know that, I asked you to look at our material. So that kind of, looking around and realizing, number one, you're surrounded by much better network than you thought. So that's been one. Second, the technical aspect and the learning has been really great. And third, kind of the confidence that's come from those two things was kind of unexpected. I thought I was going to be a lot more scared. But seeing that I have good people and that we know what we're doing, definitely know what we're doing, has been really good. So
yeah, and I think it's, you've got to, you're also probably facing, differing skill sets, right? So
yeah,
when you're an executor, it's kind of like how I'm going to dumb it really down, right? Leasing agents versus property managers. Property managers, you got checklists, and you know what you got to do, and you got to get it done. And leasing is selling. So that's kind of like, for you, project management, you have a list, what you've got deadlines, what you've got to do, and you've got to accomplish it. Fundraising is a whole other ball of wax. You're selling. And people don't just say yes on the first, right? You've got you've got to grow the list. Shiloh spoke at the conference last year, and her whole topic was how she didn't raise the money the first time. She had to couldn't close on the deal because her network wasn't big enough, right? And now this year she comes to the conference, she meets a bunch of women, she meets me. She not saying, but she oversubscribed because she realized my network's not big enough to fundraise. So she couldn't close on that deal, but she learned some very valuable lessons. And she, like you, project manager, right? Very similar, turnaround queens that you all are, that you handle all of these big, her projects I think are smaller than yours, but it's definitely a different skill set. You know, to sell, you might have to talk to someone 10 times, and you've got to figure out, how do I talk to them? You can't just, I always say in my posts, following up, circling back and checking in is not a way to follow up and ask for a decision, right?
Yeah.
And that's completely different than a checklist in project management. It's a whole different skill set.
100%. And I think too, like to your point though, because I've been running my own shop for a little while, I mean, I am selling, and this is one of the interesting things that has been a really great overlap between having my own company, is that I am selling too. I do need to bring in projects because that's how I keep my team alive, and that's also how we, get together a little bit of funds so that we can go into put our own commitment into our own deals when we develop. Right. So for me, the selling and the selling my experience and selling my team's experience and our proficiency has actually been exactly the same that we sell to investors, because that's literally what we're saying. Hey, we know how to execute on these things. This is how we've sold it to the people who typically you would give money to, who then would go hire me.
Right,
so
right, exactly.
It really has had an overlap there, and that's been a really interesting thing.
And you've had a huge benefit in the fact that the property, that you got the heads up that this property was coming. It didn't come so fast that you weren't ready. This is a very unique situation where, I'd like to know about a property a few months in advance to where I could get all my, all my ducks in a row, right? So that when it's ready, I'm ready. Normally, you get the deal and you're scrambling. Because
and I think
you got 30 days due diligence and 15 days to close, and I got to go raise some money.
Exactly. And I think, so there's a mix of things here and a mix of strategies. The first one is, because of my experience in execution, we've created a really good network, which has included some people who knows things like these. So they know my criteria, and when they see a deal, they'll call me and say, hey, this is going to go up for sale. Go get your ducks in a row. Or even people who currently own assets, especially in New York, who have, office buildings, let's say, who are not in necessarily a great situation with their lender, and they want to solve a problem. They might call me and say, hey, look, we would want you to manage this or help us out. That also poses itself as an opportunity for us to invest. And so the way that the deals are coming in from in that perspective, in a way, it's inbound. We're not cold calling property owners in Manhattan just yet. Maybe eventually we'll have a team that will do that, but we just don't have the team right now. We are getting a lot of deal flow from that experience. So a lot of the setup for my company, my development management company, wasn't just like, hey, we're going to make money, put a little money aside so we can invest in stuff, but also like, we're going to create all of these relationships where once we go execute, we can reach out to them, and they go all the way from like lenders to brokers who have this inside information, even like property owners that I've worked with in the past who may own another property. So it's been very strategic in setting this up for 5 years. This wasn't like I decided to start a development company just because.
Right. Well, I can tell you, network. You just never know where you're going to meet people. We met 100%. On Twitter, right?
Yes.
You just never know where you're going to meet people. One of my biggest accounts I met on Clubhouse during COVID. You just always have to put yourself out there. So before we start to wrap up, do you want to share some details about the fund, or is it too early?
No, our fund, so it's a closed-end fund. It's a 10-year fund. We're targeting about 3x on the fund, and the IRR in the mid-teens. Our time frame for each deal is about 4 to 7 years, and we will probably invest in 2 to 5 deals in Manhattan, and they're all going to be condo deals. Whether it's via conversion or ground up, I would suspect that they're mostly going to be ground up, just because, again, our bar is so high for conversions. And that's really very general criteria for the fund. On the deals that we're looking at, again, 40 to 120,000 square feet, they're probably going to be in like the 60 to $120 million all in. project, and the acquisitions that we're looking at are between 25 and I would say $50 million, 50, 55. So that's very broadly our criteria.
And what's the minimum investment?
Minimum investment in the fund is 500,000.
Okay. And then you and your company, or you and your partner, are putting in equity in each deal?
We are in each deal, but also in the fund. We have a GP commitment part of in there. So yeah, as well.
And do you know what your fees are going to be yet?
So in the fund, and across all projects, our fees are going to be 5% on a development fee for, it's 5% of soft and hard costs only. So, we're not doing 5% of the overall commitment. And then for the, as for the management fee, it's a 1.5 for the first 5 years. So that's kind of how we're looking at it. And we've found that to be market and very fair. And if anything,
what about acquisition?
No acquisition fees. No, none.
Yeah, I don't do that either.
No, especially because if we're looking at the New York market, the reality is a lot of the deals that we're going to be looking at are going to be widely marketed. It's not a market that is so off market. Like, there are some markets where most of the things you're going to find are not really listed. Whereas in New York, most deals, I would say, go through bid processes. Yep. Sure, there's soft market stuff, but yeah.
But that hasn't stopped other GPs from charging an AC fee, even if it's, true. I mean, okay.
Yes.
All right. So if you had to give one piece of advice to a woman who is sitting on the sidelines, but is smart, is engaged in our business like you have been, for, let's say, many years, 10, 15 years, has money to invest, but is investing in, NVIDIA and Tesla, what would be your advice for her to start putting her toe in the water?
I mean, definitely reach out to people who you find interesting in the space. Like, put yourself out there. And when you reach out to people, sometimes people reach out to me and say, hey, can we chat? That doesn't mean anything. If you say, hey, I'm interested in X, Y, and Z, and I would love to know your perspective on this specific thing, those are great conversations, because then we have a real questions to answer, and we can start a real conversation, and potentially we can end up in a relationship where we're friends, and maybe we invest in each other's things, and maybe we meet other people in bigger network through that person. So I think you just really reach out, put yourself out there, and don't be scared. I mean, there's everyone does it, right? And everyone survives it. So it's good to put yourself out there and tell people what you want, what your goals are, and what you're doing. And sometimes you fail, and that's okay.
I wrote about that on Twitter today.
Yep, there you go.
Well, Antonia, I'm so excited that you were here, that you came on board. I'm very excited about your fund. I'm going to be watching and seeing how successful it's going to skyrocket. I hope some of the listeners, we have, let's see, 142 people watching live.
This is great.
So you never know. And you never know. There might be someone on here that's going to reach out to you. So what's the best way to reach out to you?
Best way to reach out to me, MADDPROJECT.com, MADD Project. That's our website. Our form is monitored 24/7. So if you reach out through the forum, you can find us. We also have info@MADDPROJECT.com. You can email me, Antonia@MADDPROJECT.com. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very easy to find. So just reach out and let me know if you're interested in chatting. I mean, I've met some really incredible people through social media in the last 5 years. I think that has really been huge. I mean, I met my partner through there. I met you through there. Moses in the community, and Reconvene, and also Eric Weatherholtz in Atlanta, just really wonderful people who are, doing meaningful things and finding the others. Right. And so, I'm one of the others. If anyone wants to find me, I'm easy to find.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending your Wednesday night with us on Women Investor Wednesdays. Thank you so much. And we will talk soon.
Thanks so much, Beth.